Left 4 Dead remains one of the best games of all time. Its story is incredible. Throughout it, we follow our first group of survivors: Bill, Zoe, Francis, and Lewis. From the apartments in No Mercy to the perilous sewers of Death Toll, the first game has an incredible array of set pieces. But one piece of that story has remained a mystery. How does the ending of Dead Air connect to the beginning of Blood Harvest? If you just play the game, it seemingly makes no sense. No crash plane, no indication, nothing. In today's video, I aim to solve this mystery. But before we do that, if you enjoy what I do here, please consider subscribing. Most people who watch these videos aren't subscribed, and it'd mean the world to me if you decided to do so. As always, if this video reaches 1,000 likes, I'll be posting baby bunny pictures on my community tab. With all that out of the way, let's dive into Left 4 Dead's Lost campaign, damn it. Before I jump into analyzing the map, I want to give you guys some background information. You see, our first group of survivors start in Philadelphia, with the campaign No Mercy. From there, they take a helicopter which crashes in the city. After navigating around, they take an armored truck to the beginning of Death Toll. Once at the end of Death Toll, they escape on a boat and are dropped off at the beginning of Dead Air. Once they reach the airport at the end of the campaign, they contact a pilot inside a nearby plane, and board it after refueling it. From there, the next campaign is Blood Harvest. We see our survivors wake up from their sleep surrounded by camping supplies, and as I mentioned earlier, there seems to be no sign of any plane or some sort of wreckage if it crashed. This is where our lost map, Damn It, comes into play. According to the Left 4 Dead wiki, Damn It is an unfinished campaign for Left 4 Dead that was made by the original creators of Left 4 Dead, Turtle Rock Studios. Although it is largely uncompleted, the campaign can be played in all modes. It consists of only 3 levels and was intended to bridge the gap between the campaign Dead Air and Blood Harvest. The campaign would have been released alongside 2 standalone survival maps, Cold Freighter and Highrise. The campaign tells the fate of our survivors as they navigate the aftermath of the plane from Dead Air that crashed. Stranded in the remote countryside, they once again fight their way through hordes of infected, searching for any signs of safety. For this video, I wanted to get my hands on the campaign and go through it with you guys. I specifically wanted to play the original completed version. However, the original remains unfinished and doesn't technically work. You can find the original on the workshop, but for the sake of this video, I found a workshop version of the map called Damn It Remastered that completes its vision faithfully. Usually I would be hesitant in covering a workshop map and passing it off as something canon adjacent, but after reading the add-on's description and playing it for myself, this is an extremely faithful version of the map. Most of the changes fix missing textures, bugs, or add assets to fill in the levels. Now that we have our hands on a copy of this elusive map, let's begin by analyzing the first chapter, titled Orchard. The campaign opens with a panning camera shot which shows us the title of the map, Damn It Remastered. This is definitely a feature added for this version and was not in the original. When the camera snaps to our survivors, we realize we're in the C-130 that we used to escape Dead Air. There's 2 important questions I have right off the bat. The first, how did we land? Well, if you walk outside, you can see a bunch of rubble behind the plane, indicating it most likely crashed. But for this to be a crash plane, it's in pretty good shape. The second question I have is, where did the weapons and items come from? Right as you load in, there's already guns, ammo, and medkits on the floor. If we assume this plane came straight from Dead Air, then it wouldn't make sense that they'd have these items. It's possible, however unlikely, that the plane could have landed somewhere to restock. The pilot could have also just handed our survivors these items prior to the crash. Speaking of the pilot, what happened to him? In the remastered version of the map, the doors to the cockpit are slightly open, and behind the survivors you can find the pilot dead on the floor. He most likely turned, causing the plane to crash. The terms of him turning are unknown. It could be our survivors, or it could have happened before they met up with him. Exiting the plane, you're immediately faced with the rubble I mentioned earlier, and to your left sits a toppled over building, resting completely on its side. If we fly above the plane, you'll notice that we've crashed on an airfield or in some type of airport. Oddly enough, for this plane to have crashed through so much concrete, it's fairly undamaged. I don't see any seats or harnesses inside the plane to hold down our survivors, so the fact that all their bones haven't broken from the impact amazes me. Walking away from the plane, you can find an open nearby hangar spray painted with a ton of no smoking warnings. Inside the hangar you can find a plane fairly intact, and later in the level you'll see more of them. It just makes me think, why didn't our survivors use these to escape? It might be because none of them know how to fly, or it was an oversight. Whatever the case, on one side of the hangar you can find a bunch of explosive barrels that nearly killed me my first time playing. If you make your way around the building, you'll find yourself in this open area. There's a barrel with some fire in it next to a building with its lights on. There's a couple more planes in this area, and you can even find a bulldozer. On the back side of this hangar you can find the Turtle Rock logo, which is a nice little nod to the map's creators. Our survivors pass by a couple more planes and hangars before stumbling across a broken wall. On the other side they find themselves in this beautiful orchard. The fog is incredibly thick, so you can't see that far, but considering all the other campaigns, this area is an incredible set piece. It reminds me of the cornfields in Blood Harvest, the way infected seem to just appear through the trees. The trees inside the orchard have all been harvested, and inside these crates you can find a bunch of apples. There's this car just sitting in the middle of the orchard that the devs use to guide the players with its headlights. On the opposite side of the orchard you can find this barn that's filled with those apple crates I talked about. There's some items you can find on the floor, but the barn mainly serves as an exit. Leaving the orchard, the next area is huge. There's an empty room behind the barn that I'd only guess would be used as a respawn closet. Huge trees, bushes, and rocks clutter the area, giving special infected opportunities to get you. Now, you're supposed to go past this truck and down the road. However, if you make your way through some bushes, you can find this hidden river. If you follow the river, it ends with a waterfall flowing into the area we'll get into later. It's nothing crazy, but the attention to detail here is incredible. They totally could have had the waterfall coming out of nowhere, but they actually went through the effort of modeling it before it became that. Ahead of the truck I mentioned earlier sits a train track. This version of the train track is slightly more detailed than the original. The original used this very weird texture, but I like what they did with this. On the train track you can find this guy who's been seemingly ripped in two by a train. There's a gun beside the dude's leg, so I don't think this person was infected at the time of death, unfortunately. As our survivors follow the train tracks, they're eventually forced off of it due to some train cars that are blocking parts of the track. Once they reach the bottom of the hill, they run into the water I was talking about earlier. If you head to your right, you can come across the waterfall, which wasn't actually finished in the original. I don't know what it is, but something about this area just speaks to me. You can find a speedboat chilling here in the water. I don't know how this would have gotten here, but it's a nice detail. Across the river, you can find yet another dead dude. This time, it seems whoever this individual was tried to use a flare to call for help. Unfortunately, our survivors were too late. From this side of the river, we can get a much clearer view of the train tracks above. It seems like a tank or some sort of bomb was responsible for derailing it. We'll find some explosives later in the campaign, so for now, one of these two explanations will have to make sense. Nearing the end of the chapter, our survivors must cross this field in order to make it to this house where we'll find the safe room. However, during gameplay, they startle an incredible amount of crows which spawn a never-ending horde. Before we head into the house, you can find some very interesting car models scattered around the house. I double-checked, and yes, the original used these models. I can't remember if these models were used in any of the other actual canon campaigns, but they're extremely detailed and fit very well here. Alongside one of the cars, you can find some item spawns, but in my experience, any player that enters this area will immediately want to get inside the house due to the horde. Speaking of the house, there's quite a lot of rooms you can explore, but once again, no one sticks around long enough to find any of this out. There's a laundry/bathroom, a living area, a dining room, and even a second living room. I don't know why these people would need two living rooms, but who am I to judge? Heading up the stairs, you can find this very detailed bedroom with a single teddy bear sitting on a dresser, and next to it hanging on the wall you can spot the original Damn It poster the map would have used. This is obviously a prototype version that wouldn't have been the finished one, but it's a nice touch. This next room is a bit odd. Inside the room you can find some sort of writing on the wall. I tried my hardest to find anything about this, but I just couldn't. So what I decided to do was to take a picture of this text and upload it to ChatGPT. So take this next part with a giant grain of salt. According to ChatGPT, the text is written in Russian. Translated to English, it says, "Our path is wide. Everything beneath our feet is ice. Listen, for Christ's sake. There is no ice beneath our feet. Bullets strike the ice. There is no ice beneath our feet. Only the whiteness of snow. All the same, beneath our feet is ice. And in the tundra there is no bridge. This night is whiter than snow. Between frost and stars, and we walked proudly. But the moment has already come. I have only a little ice left. Slowly I have grown so tired. But in my eyes there is longing. Neither by shouting nor by voice. Did our path lead anywhere but across the ice? Blades hang on the wires, and the acid is shattered. Someone has no face, and the whole day was a misfortune. The labels are finished. Yes, the end. the dream. It's a pretty interesting find. If you speak Russian and can read this properly, please let me know if any of what I said was correct. Unfortunately, all of this text is not in the original, so it might have been some sort of Easter egg left by the developers of the remaster, but I thought it was pretty creepy, so I decided to mention it. The other room upstairs is the safe room, which concludes this chapter. Overall, this map is incredible, especially due to the work the community put in to finish it and make it playable. The biggest difference I see in this chapter compared to the actual campaigns we ended up with is the amount of wide open areas you get to explore. While they are sometimes pointless to explore due to gameplay reasons, the river area and orchard allow the players to actually take their time. That's not to say the campaigns we got didn't have open areas at all, but this first chapter of Dammit really spreads its wings open. With this chapter finally concluded, we can move on to the second one, titled Campground. Starting right where we left off, our survivors open the safe room door to find a huge hole in the floorboards. Before jumping down, you can spot some wall graffiti that says "what the hell" followed by a bunch of no's. Inside the safe room, you can find some wall clippings explaining how to get to the military outpost we see in Blood Harvest, which explains how they know about it at the beginning of that campaign. As our survivors jump down, they find a dead guy, which could have been the one who wrote the message above. Behind him sits a toilet that would have been in the bathroom, but has fallen down due to the giant gaping hole. Finally exiting the house, our survivors stumble across some burning wood before finding a bridge that seemingly you can't enter. However, just then an A-10 Warthog flies above and bombs the bridge, blowing up its doors and setting it ablaze. You can spot a river below the bridge, and it's likely that it's an extension of the one we saw earlier. Our survivors cross the bridge, jumping over the holes in the floor and avoiding any fires. The opposite side of the bridge connects to a road. There's a strange amount of cars piled up here for this map to be located in the countryside. If you make your way past all these cars, you can find a military gate that says to stop, do not exit your vehicle, which explains why there's so many cars piled up here. They would have just ended up having to sit here. You can find this military truck with some explosive barrels nearby, and by walking past the truck, you'll enter the campground. If we explore the campground for a second, we'll find some pretty interesting details. There's a flagpole with an American flag waving in the wind, and next to it you can find a sign that says Allegheny National Forest. Now, this forest is a real national forest located in the northeastern United States, and is the same forest our survivors come across at the beginning of Blood Harvest. Now, you can also find two nearby cabins that actually have interiors thanks to the remaster. Oddly enough, they seem pretty cozy. Heading over to the main camping building, inside you'll find the place has been completely trashed and looted. There's a couple guns that you can find on the counter, but other than that, this place doesn't have much. When I first explored this area, I thought the military might have been using the campground as a location to hold people while they figure out what to do with them. However, this place looks like it's been run through and doesn't seem like people would have stuck around very long. Behind the counter, you can find the bathrooms. In one of the stalls, you can find a guy who seemingly shit his guts out. And in the room next to it, you can find what looks like a living space someone made. Now, I know I literally just said I don't think people would have been stopping here, but this living space doesn't seem like it was made prior to the infection. It seems like someone just wandered into the campground and decided to chill back here before probably dying. If we exit the area and follow the road, we'll come across the actual camping areas. It seems the people that were here got blindsided by the infection, because it doesn't seem like these people had much of a chance to escape once the military came in. I just wanted to add that this area is gigantic. There's a ton of trees, rocks, and bushes that you can climb through. This entire area is explorable. You can even loop all the way to the back of one of the buildings and find a tier 2 weapon spawn alongside a medkit. Our survivors are able to climb up the side of a hill and continue on their way. As they make their way to what seems like a clearing, the A-10 from earlier drops a bunch of bombs, setting the entire area on fire. This part of the level is exceptionally beautiful. The lighting and use of set design works extremely well. There's craters everywhere, and you can even find this glowing residue that seems to be some sort of ash. There's hundreds of charred infected littered across the area. On the other side of this wasteland, you can even find some sort of building. The building has obviously been destroyed just like everything else. The military was obviously bombing this area to try and slow the infection in any way they could. After exiting this fallout-like zone, our survivors find themselves in what looks like a lumber yard. Whichever company was here prior to the infection must have been trying to cut down some trees in the area. Our survivors try to continue, however their path is blocked by some of the lumber dangling from a pulley. The survivors follow the pulley's line and find a generator hooked up to it. They press a button allowing the pulley to be powered, but unfortunately it's not moving. So from the generator they fight through the horde until they make it to a nearby watchtower. On top you can find find some items, but most importantly the pulley's control pad, and by activating it, they're finally able to escape the area. Before we leave this area though, I want to mention this machine gun spot. It's probably the best mounted gun spot in the entire game. It gives you clear access to the entire area below and is incredibly fun to shoot. Most of the other mounted gun spots in the game are kind of trash and you can't really shoot much with them. Once past the watchtower, survivors finally make it to the dam, the heart of this campaign. A nearby sign reads Allegheny National Forest Kinzua Dam. The dam is located 6 miles east of Warren, Pennsylvania, along Route 50. Within the 500-acre Allegheny National Forest, a boat marina and beach are located within the dam boundaries. In addition to providing flood control and power generation, the dam created Pennsylvania's second deepest lake, the Allegheny Reservoir, also known as Kinzua Lake. From the sign, we can also see the dam has been established in 1965. This is once again a real-world location, and it seems whoever made this sign grabbed this excerpt off Wikipedia, because you can find this exact wording there. This chapter ends with our survivors entering a safe room on the backside of one of the industrial buildings. All in all, this chapter is incredible. Once again, it seems to have a lot more open areas, allowing the players to explore. If we take a look at Blood Harvest starts in the same forest, and it surprisingly has little room to explore. I'm very glad they opened it up in this campaign. With this chapter concluded, let's move on to the final one, titled Dam. The final chapter opens inside a control room. There's a desk with 6 screens and a bunch of different PCs under the desk. On the wall, there's an Employee of the Month plaque. I assume whoever this is was the developer of the remaster. Our survivors climb up a ladder in a nearby room and access the rooftop. They break a window, allowing them to jump down into the next area. The room is filled with these 3 giant cylindrical containers. On the ground, you can find a couple of cans, ammo, and other various items. Our survivors attempt to exit the building but are faced with a barricade, similar to the one in Dead Air. Just like in Dead Air, shooting these cans somehow summons an entire horde, but it is what it is. Once they're out of the building, our survivors enter a door at the bottom of the dam. They climb up the stairs and find themselves on the very bottom layer of the dam. They hop down the ledge and come across some interesting things. There's some crates with a couple of items and a few military vehicles nearby. This is where the remastered version is slightly different from the original. The original has our survivors blow up parts of the dam, which causes the doors to close and spawn a tank. In the remaster, they manually open the hatch with the button and the scene plays out like normal. This is a pretty big difference because in the original, it's implied that explosives are rigged up before our survivors ever find their way to the dam, hinting the military might have been trying to explode the dam in an attempt to halt the spread of the infection, or section off this area from being accessed entirely. Whatever the case is, these hatches open, allowing water to flow through the dam. If you're caught behind the doors when they close, you'll be flushed out of the dam, plummeting to your death. This interactivity is amazing. I love how you can actually manipulate the map, which forces you to take action or die. Although it is heavily scripted, we haven't seen anything really like this. Sure, you have your explosion waiting sections, but this is new and interesting. Once our survivors kill the tank and make it to the end of the tunnel, they wait for the door to open and find an elevator. If you take the elevator, it leads you to the middle section of the dam. The survivors shimmy their way across the dam and find yet another elevator. This time, however, it leads them to the very top. While going up in the elevator, you can look out of the glass and spot some wall graffiti. This graffiti isn't canon, rather it's just the names of those who worked on the remaster. Once they exit the elevator, they find the top of the dam has been blocked off by the military, so our survivors must flip a switch in order to open up the gates. After flipping the switch, the doors create this incredible loud noise, spawning thousands of infected. Shooting through the horde, you'll eventually make your way to a second gate, which requires the same sort of switch to be activated. After the gate opens, our survivors make a mad dash down the road and stumble across this sign. Anything after opening this last gate is not in the original. The original seemingly just ends here. So our friends who made this remaster obviously took a few liberties. I mean, after all, it wasn't finished. Once they read the sign, they run down the staircase to their left and make it to the base of the dam. To your right, you'll find another Allegheny National Forest sign, and by following the trail, it leads you to a very familiar camp. Obviously, it's the one from the beginning of Blood Harvest. And and with one last camera pan, the campaign ends. You might be confused, don't we have a giant horde following us? How would it make sense that we could just set up camp here and be safe? Well, my fellow viewer, you'd be correct. As I mentioned earlier, the devs of the remaster had to take a few liberties, and unfortunately I think they rushed this portion. It just doesn't make sense to me how they would have been chased by a giant horde just to find a camp 10 feet away. In my opinion, the ending should have been after the final gate. Once all our survivors make it past the gate, they find yet another switch on the opposite side, allowing them to close it. The final cinematic ends with our survivors catching their breath and looking over their shoulders, glancing at the National Forest sign, and that's where it ends. This to me makes more sense. It would directly imply they go into the forest and set up a camp, without actually seeing it. While it's nice to see the camp at the very end, it really doesn't make any sense. This to me makes more sense. It explained how they were able to set up camp without the giant horde following them, and would imply they go into the forest later, beginning Blood Harvest the next morning. It's nice to see the campaign end with the Blood Harvest camp, but unfortunately, I don't think it works. Damn It is an amazing map. I personally wish they would have finished it and added it to the base game as a DLC, but thanks to the beautiful world of mods, we have essentially the same thing. It just would have been nice to have some sort of canon acknowledgement. Overall, the remaster is incredible, besides the ending. It's absolutely perfect in my opinion. Taking into account the remastered version of the campaign, I'd rate it a solid 9 out of 10. If you enjoyed this video, please remember to like and subscribe. It really helped me out a lot. Did I get anything wrong? Did I miss something? Remember, if you speak Russian, please tell me about that one section. I'm not 100% sure about that. Let me know anything else down in the comments below. Have a nice rest of your day. Peace out.